Today, we are going to explore chaos and the marginalized feminine. But before I get into our discussion today, I just want to say, kind of like as a disclaimer, um, that when I do my videos, I am not in the business of trying to convert people to a certain belief system, nor am I coming from a place of trying to debate an already established belief system. Being someone who does not like labels or rigid belief systems or groups, I am just someone who simply loves expressing herself based on personal experiences. So I love sharing stuff with you guys via my videos. Um, so a lot of my beliefs, like I stated, are based on my own personal life experiences. So my philosophy is based off of these life experiences. We all have our own experiences, right? I feel that is what actually makes life beautiful. Being able to share our beliefs without judgment, being able to share so someone else can have a different avenue of perception accessible so their mind can actually expand. Um, I've always been a bit of an outcast, a little strange. And I've also never been scared to walk my own path despite people's opinions about me. Um, as a woman, that can be especially hard, given the times and growing up in Western tradition, who thrives off patriarchy, I guess I could say. And not that long ago, I took a vow to walk the path of truth, my truth, no matter the persecution or no matter what people had to say. Okay. Also, I wanted to give a friend of mine, Mariana, who I call Mari, a shout out, who gave me a little bit of inspiration for the talk that I'm going to have today. She actually recommended a book for me to read called Eros and Chaos. And I just wanted to give her a shout out for her being one of the inspirations behind my discussion today. So thanks, girl. So, chaos is a symptom. Let me go back. So, chaos is a system of nonlinear dynamics. And we can see how the feminine, cyclical, sensual, dark, rhythmic, terrifying, transformative is related to chaos in itself. And because our culture has been shaped by values that prioritize control, productivity, and hierarchy, of the wide range of feminine qualities, only the virginal as chaste and motherly aspects have been acceptable to the patriarchal ego. And we as a people have even lost the original meaning of the word virgin. So I don't know if a lot of you know the word virgin originally meant free woman, meaning having her own integrity in life, unrelated to anyone else, and certainly unrelated to her sexual choices. The darker, more chaotic aspects of the feminine, especially by Western culture, have been devalued and even demonized with labels such as witch, mystic, whore, hysteric, and even borderline and multiple personality disorder. Every woman is also this other woman that I'm going to be discussing today. These other darker, more chthonic aspects. So we're going to be talking about the treacherous yet inspirational switch from domestic fidelity to the center of gravity, rooted in the law of your own feminine essence. And we're going to talk about this other woman who has been neglected and abused throughout the ages, who refuses to be silenced. She cannot be erased or suppressed. She will eventually find her voice. She wants to tell her story. She will not be disregarded or disrespected. She just wants to live her life with authenticity and integrity and with an abundance of love and, of course, truth. There is a particular kind of chaos that follows women who have learned to abandon themselves quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, but subtle. In the places where desire is negotiated, where intuition is softened, where truth is delayed just long enough to keep the connection intact. For a long time, I did not have a language for this. I only knew the feeling of being close, but not fully met, chosen, but not entirely claimed, seen, but only in fragments. It showed up in my romantic relationships, in my spiritual seeking, and in the way I learned to measure my worth through intensity rather than presence. And what I mistook for passion was often chaos. What I mistook for love was often longing. And what I mistook for devotion was, at times, self erasure, dressed up as loyalty. It wasn't until that I encountered it wasn't until recently, when I read this book, Eros and Chaos, that something inside me kind of clicked in place. Not because it told me something new, but because it named something that I had already lived. It talks about this other woman, and this other woman is not always a role we play in someone else's life. Sometimes she is the position we occupy within our own, secondary to our own knowing, accommodating at the cost of truth, negotiating desire instead of actually honoring it. And chaos, I've learned, is often what erupts when the body knows, but the voice has been trained to stay quiet. And this is not a story about like scandal or sexuality in the way our culture reduces it. Um, this is about a story about Eros, not as performance, but as life force, about the intelligence of the body, about what happens when a woman's deepest knowing is felt, ignored, and slowly buried beneath survival strategies that once kept her safe. And this reflection is part spiritual inquiry, part lived truth. And if this resonates with you, it's likely because you've touched this place too. And this is a place where desire asks to be honored and chaos arrives when it is not. Okay? And when that knowing is ignored, and when that knowing in a woman is ignored for long enough, it does not simply disappear. It actually turns inward. It settles into the nervous system. It begins to take shape as guilt and shame. Oh, guilt and shame. I've lived with those for uh, yeah. So um when that no inner knowing is ignored long enough, it can take shape as guilt and shame, not because something is inherently wrong, but because we are trying to live in ways that are fundamentally misaligned with who we are. And this is where the chaos becomes quieter, heavier, and far more personal. There is another layer to this chaos that often goes unnamed. The guilt that accumulates when we attempt to fulfill roles that were never truly ours to carry. And for a long time, I believe that if something felt difficult, if I struggled to inhabit a role with ease or fulfillment, um, it meant I was failing. I internalized the idea that resistance was a flaw, that exhaustion was a personal shortcoming, and that not thriving inside certain identities meant something was wrong. There's something wrong with me. So, shame took root inside of me. And now when I look back, it wasn't because I lacked love, devotion, or effort. It was because I was trying to live according to expectations that were never designed with my full with who I was meant to be. And instead of questioning the structure itself, I questioned my worth. Instead of listening to my body and my intuition, I disciplined it. Instead of honoring, of course, my intuition, I overrode it in the name of responsibility, duty, and what I believe that I should be. And I think I talked about this in one of my previous videos about motherhood. So, one of these roles, motherhood in particular became a place where there's guilt intensified, not as a lack of love, but as a profound misalignment between the myth of who I was supposed to be, what kind of mother I was supposed to be, and the truth of who I actually was. And there's a lot in between there, but this is, just to consolidate this. Um, and rather than being given language for that dissonance, I absorbed it as shame, as guilt. And, you know, I mistook struggle for inadequacy. I mistook grief for failure. I mistook misalignment for moral deficiency. And let me just go back. I'm not perfect. I did make a lot of mistakes in that role as a mother, but I'm just, like I said, I'm just trying to speak in general about some of the roles that I have played and um, things that are related into what I'm talking about. And what I understood now is that much of the guilt women carry is not evidence of wrongdoing. It is evidence of having tried to survive within roles that required self um, erasure. Roles that asked us to suppress our Eros, our intuition, our complexity, and our limits in order to remain acceptable. And when a woman carries that kind of shame long enough, chaos doesn't erupt outwardly, it turns inward. It becomes anxiety, self doubt, hypervigilance, and a quiet disconnection from the body's truth. This too is part of the story of the marginalized feminine. And yet, even buried beneath guilt and shame, something remained intact. I always had that quiet awareness, a subtle resistance, a knowing that refused to die, even when I tried to silence it. Because shame, for all its weight, never fully erased the truth, it only delayed my return to it. There comes a moment, sometimes slowly, sometimes through rupture, when a woman realizes that what she has been carrying is not evidence of her failure, but proof of her endurance. That the pain she has been trying to fix is not a flaw to be corrected, but a message asking to be listened to. This is where chaos begins to change its meaning. And what I began to understand, slowly, reluctantly, and honestly, is that chaos was never trying to destroy me. It was actually trying to shake me up, to wake me up. And the unraveling I resisted for so long was not random nor cruel. It was the natural consequence of living too far away from my own center of gravity, of negotiating desire instead of honoring it, of shaping myself around roles, relationships, and identities that demanded my compliance but not my wholeness. Chaos entered when the distance between who I was and who I was pretending to be became unsustainable. This is something we are rarely taught, especially as women. We are taught to interpret breakdown as weakness, loss as failure, and discomfort as something to be managed rather than understood. But from an embodied feminine perspective, chaos is often the psyche's last remaining language when all other signals have been ignored. It is the body insisting on truth. Seen this way, chaos is not pathology, it is initiation. And I talked about initiation in my last video. Not punishment, but invitation. An invitation back into alignment with Eros' life force, not performance. Back into intuition as authority, not inconvenience. What once felt like personal deficiency began to reveal itself as systemic misalignment. And what I had internalized as shame slowly revealed itself as grief. Grief for the woman I abandoned in order to survive, and grief for the parts of myself that were never given permission to exist. And this is where the other woman begins to change form. She is no longer the hidden figure, um, relegated to the margins. The one who carries desire, anger, intuition, and depth and secrecy. She becomes the guardian of truth, the part of us that knows when something is wrong long before we can even explain why. The part that refuses to be pacified by roles, approval, or borrowed meaning. And once she is recognized, chaos no longer needs to scream. It can finally soften into clarity. So, as women, how can we reclaim this other woman? How can we integrate her? When the other woman is finally seen clearly, something important shifts. She is no longer the figure burdened with shame, secrecy, or exile. She is no longer the one blamed for chaos, desire, or disruption. She is revealed for what she has always been, the part of a woman that carries instinct, truth, Eros, and embodied intelligence, the part that knows. And for generations, this aspect of the feminine has been misnamed and misunderstood, reduced to something dangerous or immoral, framed as excessive, unstable, or threatening. But the truth is far simpler and far more sacred. She is the part of us that refuses to live disconnected from ourselves. She is not reckless. She is honest. She does not destroy structure for the sake of destruction. She exposes structures that cannot hold truth. When women are taught to suppress this part of themselves, chaos does not disappear. It simply finds quieter, more painful expressions: anxiety, self doubt, disassociation, guilt for wanting more, eating disorders, and the list goes on. Shame for not fitting neatly into roles that were never designed to hold the full complexity of a living, breathing woman. So, reclaiming the other woman is not about rejecting your responsibilities, love, or care. It is about reclaiming authority over one's inner life. It is about no longer outsourcing truth to expectation, tradition, or external validation. It is the return of sovereignty. So, um, one of the most radical acts a woman can take is to trust what her body knows. And that's why I do feel like women do have a sixth sense, our intuition. So, trust what her body knows, not impulsively, not reactively, but reverently. Embodiment is not about indulgence. It is about integration. It is about allowing sensation, intuition, emotion, and intellect to exist in conversation rather than competition. When a woman learns to listen to her body, she stops living as a fragmented self. This is where Eros is restored to its rightful place, not as something to be negotiated, suppressed, or performed, but as life force itself, the current that animates creativity, boundaries, desire, grief, pleasure, and truth. When Eros is honored, chaos no longer needs to act as messenger or as a messenger. The body no longer has to scream to be heard. Instead, there is discernment. There is grounded choice. There is the quiet confidence of alignment. And this does not mean life becomes easy, but it becomes honest. So if you're listening to this and you feel a recognition in your body, a tightening in the chest, a softening in the belly, a quiet yes, you can't quite explain, know this. You're not broken, you are not failing, you are not wrong for feeling the way that you feel, and the guilt or shame that you carry may not be yours to keep. And all of that you've internalized, maybe the residue of roles that asked you to disappear. The chaos you've endured may not be punishment, but a calling, like your divine intervention. And there is nothing inherently flawed about wanting depth, truth, embodiment, and integrity. There is nothing wrong with resisting identities that require self erasure. And there is nothing selfish about choosing to live in alignment with your own inner authority. The feminine was never meant to be neat, silent, domesticated, demure, or obedient, which, it's okay to be those things, but, she was meant to be whole, you know? Um, so the other woman does not need permission to exist. She has never been lost, only constrained. The other woman does not need permission, um, to exist. She's never been absent, only restrained by systems that asked her to soften her truth in order to remain acceptable. She does not arrive to create chaos just for its chaos's sake. She arrives when silence has gone on too long, when compromise has become self erasure, when the body has been asked to endure what the soul no longer consents to carry. When she is honored, chaos loses its urgency. When she is listened to, shame begins to loosen. When she is embodied, life starts to reorganize around what is honest rather than what is expected. So this path is not about being rebellious. It's not about being a spectacle or burning everything down. It is about standing fully inside one's own authority, grounded, discerning, and awake, and allowing truth to become the organizing principle of your life, a woman's life. This is about living honestly and authentically, and allowing yourself to become one with the other woman.